As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain, keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gon' give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WMHH-LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning. Good morning. Is there an echo here? Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you, Dr. Perry.
Yes, sir. I'm just happy that we can get together to launch a new beginning for the new coming of a new year and a new day.
Yeah.
And so our show today is centered around the YCCI Cultural Ambassadors then and now. So we're going to look at where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. And we have three incredible guests, the Reverend Alvin Clayton, the Reverend Eldrin Morrison, and the Reverend Dr. Darrell Blue. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm going to have you just introduce yourselves for a minute so folk will get to know you. They'll be seeing a lot more of you in the future. Some of you in the seat that I'm sitting right now, I hope. And we're going to do some fantastic work in the future. So, Reverend Clayton, you want to start us off?
I am Alvin Clayton. I am the pastor of Walters Memorial AME Zion Church in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I've been a cultural ambassador for some 15 years, former chaplain, and want to be a Motown musician.
Okay, Reverend Morrison.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I am the Reverend Eldrin Morrison, the pastor of the Shaw Temple AME Zion Church in Smyrna, Georgia, just right outside of Atlanta. I have been a cultural ambassador since the inception of this wonderful partnership, and I'm looking forward to continuing this partnership and seeing it grow around the country. At first, I didn't think it would gain access out of the state of Connecticut, but since moving here to Georgia, I can really see that the program can grow.
All right.
Okay.
Reverend Blue.
Yes, I am Darrell Blue, and I have been a cultural ambassador for 10 years now in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm like Reverend Morrison, looking at how this program has expanded, and just excited to have a conversation about what we've been doing and how we can continue to help our communities.
All right, and we want to thank you, Harry Dross, for station manager, WNHH, for putting us back together again like Humpty Dumpty. And we look forward to our future collaboration and working together in the new year that's coming. So, Reverend Clayton, I want you to start us off and just tell us about how the Cultural Ambassador Program got started and what were some of the challenges that we face.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. The Culture Ambassadors really started with Teacher Johnson. She was the motor. She was the engine of this great work when it wasn't popular to bring forth the importance of minority participation in clinical research. And so she put together a focus group in New Haven with Hispanics and the Black populations, and to try to find out why this group of people would not participate in clinical research, and why they were not willing to do anything to help Yale. And basically what happened, she discovered that the Black population and the Latinx population did not trust Yale, and if they were going to get involved in anything concerning Yale, it had to be someone that they trusted. And two groups in New Haven and in the state of Connecticut that they felt that would be helpful, or two groups that they thought that they trusted. One was the church. And, you know, for people of color, the church is the place. Everybody may not go to church, but everybody is connected somehow to the church. And in the Hispanic population, it was Junta. And so with these two groups, she had to figure out a way to get them connected to her and to Yale. For her, she thought she had an easy end because her uncle, the Reverend Timothy Howard, who was our presiding elder, who was presiding over 15 churches in the Hartford district, she thought that she would ask him to have us come to a meeting. She asked him, and he says, "Of course, anything for you." But when she told him that it was clinical research, he declined. He said, "I'm not going to be a guinea pig. I'm not going to get involved in this, and I'm not going to have our preachers get involved in this." And then she explained to him the importance of our people being involved. And somehow he said, listen, I'll get him there, but I'm not going to tell him what it's about. So that's basically how we started. Challenges, yes, because our people had the thoughts of Tuskegee and the Henrietta Lacks situation. Most people understand that, and all the other myths surrounding clinical research. But as we went to these meetings, we began to learn more and more and more about the importance of how many of our people die compared to our white brothers and sisters, and in almost every area of illness and disease, prostate cancer, breast cancer, and the list goes on, never mind COVID. So that's basically how we started, and let somebody else share with us this morning.
Yes, we're gonna move on to Reverend Morrison, because Reverend Morrison tore up New Haven while he was in Varick, one of the fastest growing churches in the area. An eligible bachelor when he started, an innovator with the Booker T. Washington Academy, and just, I mean, he just took New Haven by storm. And so bringing him on board, having him being a part of this founding group was so important. And I just want to ask you to speak this more, particularly around the issue of how these cultural, and why was it so important that these cultural ambassadors received the training that would help them, you know, in terms of being ambassadors, and why that was so important, and what Yale did to foster that.
Yes, Dr. Perry, you're right. I tore it up and they put me out. They put me all the way down here in Georgia. But I mean, we had an awesome time in New Haven. New Haven is an interesting place because you've got one of the most renowned institutions of higher learning, Yale, in the world. And yet next door to it, a block from it, where Varick Church is located, you have some of the poorest persons in the state of Connecticut, poverty, such a high poverty rate, and both of them in the same space, which really mirrors so much of what we see going on in this realm of healthcare and every realm, really, particularly around healthcare, because you've got some of the greatest doctors in healthcare in the world right there in that city, and yet you've got people perishing when they don't have to. They could have access to some of these great clinical trials, these new medicines, these new techniques and doctors, and yet there is this great gulf or this divide between the two of them, as if they're not speaking the same language, and that's true. Tisha was a part of the church there, and I never knew she was even involved with any of this. I knew she worked at Yale, and that's all I knew. And it took Timothy Howard to bring this together. She didn't want to even tell me at first exactly what it was. And really sitting there and dealing with and hearing from her what clinical trials were. I don't have to tell all of us here. We're educated in theology. We don't have medical degrees. So this terminologies and all the practices and all of these new things going on would be foreign to us. And certainly it would be that way to our congregations. And so it was important for us, as we were the first ambassadors really on, that we knew exactly what was going on. And so we received some extensive training from the best anywhere you could find. So we got the rigorous training about what a clinical trial is, the difference of what clinical trials were years ago to the stipulations and all of the rigid policies that must be adhered to presently. And that's before the FDA even comes on to it. When the FDA gets into it and these phases of trials, it becomes even more rigorous for an idea or someone's thought process of what would make a good treatment or medicine to actually get on the market, and all of the safeguards that are put in place. I mean, we went through all of those things, the regulations. We've gone through how much it costs. We've gone through looking at what people get from these trials. How are people compensated fairly? How do you treat people right? What's equity in these clinical trials? We've gone through and continue to go through a lot of training so that we can be able to represent to our community, to our church, to the larger community, what these clinical trials are and why they are so important to our people. And so, if nothing else, I've appreciated the conversations with the top doctors, the top clinicians from around the world, really, being able to come and talk to us about what clinical trials are, and we being able to share with them the concerns and the needs of our own community.
Yeah, thank you. You know, Pastor, you've also had contact with people like Dr. Onyema and Cece from the Sickle Cell Clinic, who visited our churches, and we've had conversations with them, so members of our community could meet these doctors and have conversation with them, and they came to our health fair. So I think that is that's something that didn't exist in the past for us. Yeah. I was telling someone yesterday in a service that I had that when I grew up, I only knew 2 Black doctors. Both of them were dentists, and I only saw them when I had a toothache. Other than that, I didn't see a Black doctor until I got I was out of college when I met Dr. Diet, who is the father of Dr. Desir over at Yale now. But it just goes to show you, you know, so to have this kind of accessibility is helpful for young people, and it's helpful for our communities, especially around the issues of trust, you know. Yeah. So let me move on to the other guest here, Reverend Blue, who is the most traveling minister, who has been moved more times than Jesus moved in Jerusalem. He's in Waterbury. He was in Western New York, and he was somewhere in Alabama or somewhere down south, and now he's in Queen City doing a fantastic job. And he's also now working with EQB Med and our ambassador there, along with Bishop Proctor and all of us. So I just want to highlight, Reverend Blue, how you effectively, during COVID, was able to bring out the troops and to help inspire people by even having your son as an advocate. And that was very new, because we normally don't see young people advocating for clinical trials or research. And it was a beautiful commercial. And I if you can find it online, I'd ask you all to look for it, because this young man looks like he's going to be something in life. So, Blue, you want to tell us about that experience during COVID and how you brought the troops in from home and abroad?
Yes, Reverend Morrison hit on it. We act as trusted voices in our community. And part of it is because we have to understand what is going on within our community. We have to be culturally sensitive. And so it was having this conversation to talk about why we need to take the vaccines, and then also express and share with our communities that it's safe to take the vaccines because they are going through clinical trials. We have two of you all that are online with us today that actually were going through the trials. And so we were able to invite doctors in. We had a lot of Zoom sessions with our people so that they could ask the questions that they needed to ask from medical professionals. So before we even took vaccines, we had safe spaces where people could come in to ask those questions that they needed to ask. And because they were trusted physicians and clinicians that they had seen in the community, we had partnered with for screenings and other things, people actually felt safe to go take the vaccines. And so part of it was not just the adults, but it was having a conversation with the young people. And I was so glad that my son was willing to take the vaccine because it was a conversation for him. You know, that's his body. And so we had that conversation. He was sharing with schoolmates and other individuals about safety. And so when we were approached to do the video, it was natural for him because he had been a part of the conversation from the very beginning. And so, like I said, our main thing was having those conversations with our community so that they would know that it's okay to do it, to receive the vaccine, and whatever questions they had were going to be answered prior to taking the vaccination.
Yeah, and see, Dr. Blue, one of the things that I think is so important for our listeners to know is that there has been a lack of individuals, particularly youth, taking the flu vaccine.
Right.
This year, there's been over 200 youth that have died for lack of taking this vaccine. And then you have the anti-vaxxers.
Mm-hmm.
Here we were looking at the number of deaths of COVID and saying, how can we get into our communities and assure them of the safety and the importance of taking the vaccine? So, the mere fact that we did this in Connecticut, that we stepped up when others across the nation weren't stepping up. People from New York and New Jersey were coming to Connecticut to get the vaccine, and our people right here in Connecticut refused to get it. They didn't want to leave their neighborhoods. They didn't trust it. And here we were as trusted messengers leading the way. And I think this is one of the things that helped us bridge this relationship with EQB Med. They saw how we went into the community and how we brought the community to where we are, where we were in Connecticut. So Reverend Clayton, you might want to talk about how we reached out to the community during COVID to get them involved in taking this vaccine.
All right. Yeah.
I know you and your wife were the first two. I know you want to tell people that, but it wasn't true. Y'all weren't the first two, but
well, tell us who the first two was. Just tell us who the first person was, then we can move on.
Oh, well, in your situation, I was first.
Well, first of all, let me let the listening audience know why you were the first ambassador to receive the vaccination. See, a certain person by the name of Leroy Perry called me and asked me when was my vaccination scheduled. And I told him on September 30th at 11 o'clock. And he said, well, mine is the next day. And so he called the office and see if they could schedule him earlier. And so when I entered the office, there was a certain person already sitting there after receiving his vaccination. See, so the truth be told, I should have been, but some person by the initials of Leroy Odinga Perry had his schedule changed. Now let's get back to the
Thank you for the explanation.
yes, sir. The recruitment for the vaccination, the COVID vaccination, was really important, and it was really important for us to be vaccinated, because one of the questions people would ask, are you willing to take it? And we could say that we already have. I said, and not only did I receive the vaccination, but my wife as well. And so that's one thing that helped us in the recruitment. Also, if you can remember back in 2021, some 385,000 people had died from COVID. And in our community, it was really terrible. Morticians were renting refrigerated trucks to house the bodies. We couldn't have a funeral with any more than 10 people at that time. And so seeing those things happening and sharing with the people how we were a part of the vaccination, it was a great help. And all of us as ambassadors, especially the pastors, had posters, and we had in-house vaccination in our churches, town hall meetings weekly to inform the community the importance of receiving this vaccination, and with doctors and nurses and laymen sharing the importance of receiving this vaccine. And one thing that's a little sidebar that I would like to share with you, gentlemen, and our listening audience. I went to my doctor for my yearly physical, and he asked to see my vaccination card. So I gave it to him, and he came back and he said, "This is not a legitimate vaccination card." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because the date on this card is before the vaccination was available to the general public." I said, "Well, my brother, I got news for you. I was a part of the COVID-19 vaccination study. So that's why that date is before the date was issued to the general public." And his response was, "Thank you."
Yeah, and I think, Reverend, that the mere fact that many of our churches open up their facilities to bring the COVID vaccine to our constituents was a great help. I know that I had over 100 people who probably would, and God knows how many lives we saved by bringing this. And so I think when the FDA and some of these other NIH looked at, the fact that we have this disparity, and yet we were able to face these challenges by doing what the Black church has always done. When we didn't have a school, we started one. Come on, Reverend Morrison.
That's right.
And they didn't know how to read, we took them to Sunday school and taught them to read from the Bible.
Yeah.
So we've always been the salve and the solution and the salvation of a people who have been disproportionately and disenfranchised in this nation. But Reverend Blue, you want to tell us why it is so important in minority populations that they receive these vaccines, like the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine and the RSV and the pneumonia. People don't understand that when we were coming up, we all didn't even question the fact that we needed to take the measles, the mumps, right. And these were sometimes given to us at one shot. Mm-hmm. But it made, now you see in public schools in New York and across the country, measles and chickenpox and mumps are coming back because we have all these anti-vaxxers and all these people telling us, like the new health attorney general, that you don't need to take these. Can you just kind of from the Black perspective, tell us why why are they so important?
Yes. I don't think, well, part of it goes to misinformation. People don't take it because they hear certain things, and Reverend Clayton dealt with it earlier, because of past experiences. We say we just stay away. But we don't realize that if we don't have appropriate data and enough people don't take the vaccine for minority communities, we don't realize any adverse effects. We don't have any way to track what's going on within our communities, and it leads to worse health in our communities because we have not taken advantage of vaccinations, advanced medicine, and other resources that are available to our community. So when you look at the research, we have more health challenges and issues because of the lack of taking advantage of the medical medicine practices that are available to our communities. So overall, that means we don't live as long. So you look at the totality of everything, and it has a greater impact on our community. So I think that's why it's so important that we get out there and spread the word to say, to our communities, this not only impacts you, but your generations. And so we have to do our part, and we are doing our part to continue to spread the word, the message to say, this goes beyond you. This is for the entire community. And if we don't take advantage of those resources that are available to us, then ultimately we're going to continue to see these generational issues and sickness continue to happen when we can address this stuff now and live longer.
Yeah, I think, Reverend Blue, that there is a crisis in culture.
Right.
And we see that in our young culture. We see it in our churches in particular how a lot of young people are faded away. There is no sense of history or continuity. There is no sense of respect of parenting, like honor your mother and your father. There's no list. The listening communications have broken down. And yet it just seems to me that our job is just that much more difficult. Anybody has any suggestions about how we might break this down in ways that our communities might become more informed and get on the good foot or the right foot in the days coming? We don't know what pandemic is ahead of us. And these that we think are behind us are creeping back on us. So what do we do? How do we reach this population? Anyone?
Doctor, we have to keep our foot to the pedal in a sense, because you mentioned it a few moments ago. We don't know what the next administration is going to do in terms of vaccines and clinical research. We don't know what funding is coming down the pike. We don't know if things will be cut. But as long as we can keep sharing, keep bringing awareness of the great importance for not just our people, but for all people. Because look, we're all in this country together, and no matter who gets a disease, it's going to spread to all of us if we're not protected. So we have to keep this message alive at every level. Those that have college education, those that may not have it, those blue collar workers, white collar workers, in the church, out the church. Every population need to hear the message of the great importance of receiving or being a part of a clinical research, so that every population will get the best out of the meds that are available.
Yeah, I think it goes to something you lifted up, Dr. Perry, and that is we have to be able to speak the language of the different generations. And you mentioned my son earlier when you asked me the question. They have terms now that they have repurposed words.
Yeah.
We have one meaning for it, but when they say it, it means something totally different. If we don't connect with our generations to better understand how they think, what makes them tick, work, move, act, then we're going to be lost, you know. And so oftentimes there's a disconnect between generations because they don't think like we think. You know, they're not moved and motivated by what we were moved and motivated by. And so it is having these conversations to say, you know, let's not only talk about history, but let's talk about you know, your understanding, what motivates you all. And so I think that as we continue to build trust, understand how they think and act, it will help us to be able to have those necessary conversations that we need to have. But here's the other part of it. Just like church, we can't show up just when we need them. We have to be a consistent presence, and we have to be working with these generations over time so that when we need or when something occurs, we can say, hey, let's mobilize and work together because we've already formed a bond and a partnership. Oftentimes we're showing up and say, hey, we need y'all to do this. And the question is, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to motivate people when you're not a trusted voice to that community and those individuals. And over time, I think that's what has happened. There has been a disconnect between what we have been overall as the church, as the central hub of everything in society. And, you know, we have to get back to that, showing up, helping to feed and take care of just those felt needs so that when things arise, they say the church has always been there. They've been consistent. And now that they're asking us to partner, we're going to do it because they've always been in partnership with us.
What I hear in this is some intentionality, being present and continuing this work. Reverend Clayton said, we've got to make sure that, and I'm thinking of even ways of the different platforms that our generations are on, as Dr. Blue was talking about. We've got to be present on there. We've got to continue the relationship building. But even our church population, they need to continue to hear these terms. A lot of them, you know, COVID just a few years ago, it might as well be 10 years ago for some of our people because it's just out of mind now. They think they've forgotten all about it. So we got to continue to remind them of how this affected us and how it presently is affecting us, and being intentional about lifting up clinical trials, lifting up our health disparities in our messages, our sermons, our teachings, Sunday school lessons. Every time we can weave that into that, we've got to continue to tell this story to generations.
You know, I mentioned at one of our EQB Med conferences about the corridor of shame, which talks about this corridor of 95 going down into South Carolina and how they have been disproportionately left out in terms of education and healthcare. And, you know, they point out this corridor of shame going through North Carolina down into South Carolina, but the corridor of shame goes across this nation when it comes to poor people and Black people. And I think that even though we may put our best efforts forward, we need the collaboration of the NIH and the FDA and schools like Yale and Morehouse and Howard and other schools to somehow reach those generations, but also have those at the top. And they need us as much as we need them.
That's right.
To bring an awareness. Like one of the questions earlier, I believe, Reverend Blue, you mentioned on it, is that some drugs that are used in clinical research that have come out did not include the regimen amount of minority population, so those drugs didn't work on that population. So that's important. And it's important for government, and it's important for the researchers, and it's important for the community that we all participate. But even the larger picture in terms of looking at how we are disproportionately lifted up or brought into institutions like Yale and Harvard and others to be a doctor. I mean, you can count on one hand the number of Black doctors, or those who are in medical school, or those who are doing clinical research. So one of the things I think the Cultures Ambassadors have done is that we have started bringing in young people into our exposure program every year. We're in the third year now. And many of them are going to be doctors, if not doctors, researchers, or working in the health field profession, fields that they thought they were not qualified for because they didn't see people who look like them, fields that they've been, strategically or systematically or racially excluded from because of where they came from, their zip code, their color, their skin, their race. So I think, it has to be all of us together, fighting together for the same thing. And it's difficult in a nation that is so divided. Our nation is divided right now more so than ever in its history. We're almost at Civil War level. And more folk are buying guns today than ever. And it's frightening. It's frightening. And hate has become a commonplace term. So we got our work. And I think this community health network or community health watch that we're doing now is going to be able to help pull together those broken strings and those broken chords to put in harmony again where we need to be as a nation. Gentlemen, I'm gonna leave it up to you to throw in right now. I just gave you my spiel for the day. Where you can just talk about how maybe in the future, I know that we were the ones who started the initiative at Duke, and with Heal and Amy Zion across North Carolina, and I'm thinking that we brought them to our general conference. We plan on going to the general conference again with the lay, with EQB Med, and we're working with the Council of Black Churches. It just seems to me that all of these things our community is not aware of. We need to make them more aware of it, and we need to, I think going forward, I think together as we work together, we can bring this show to Charlotte, to Atlanta, to Greensboro, to wherever we need to, where we find this disparity to help people learn, and we can listen as they learn and learn while we're listening.
That's
to
right.
make this effective.
Yeah, Dr. Perry, you said something interesting that gun sales have gone up. It's interesting when you look at Bible sales. So Bibles and gun sales have gone up over the last few months, particularly. We've got our work cut out for us as ministers here, trying to protect the health and the souls of our people. But I agree with you. One of the things that continues to really stay on my mind is that in clinical trials, they're largely and overwhelmingly, really, 75% of them are white. 8% of Black folk participate in clinical trials in this country. And yes, there's a history. Yes, we've had that, but look how much work has been done since then. So when you talk about getting Black folk involved in these clinical trials, that's one thing. And then you also mentioned about making sure that not only are we representing the trials, but we are the persons who are the clinicians. We've coming up with the ideas, and we are actually the ones putting out these trials for our own people. When we see ourselves represented in this, in every aspect of it, that's when we begin to close those gaps and those percentages. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Reverend Morrison, I see that behind you is one of the books that Yale gave you as part of the training. I just want to commend you for having that on your bookshelf.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate everything they've given us. I take it out and use it.
That's right. That's right. And that's one of the things I think we can also do maybe in the future is work out a book list like the medical apartheid, birthing of a slave, and make sure that just getting people to read today is a difficult task. So that alone is something, but I think in Sunday school, we can have both lessons at the same time.
Right.
And I think if we train together and work together, we can find some solutions. And I personally think that the NIH and FDA should give churches that do this kind of work a bonus or a stimulus to do it, because we've saved in the medical field millions of dollars in doing this, and we get only return we get is to see minimum results and when they want to give it to us. So we need to have a bigger voice at the table, and I think that's one of my goals for the future, is how we can do that together.
I was going to say that, Dr. Perry. That I think that's a goal that we need to do. And feeding into what both you and Reverend Morrison said, and that is, this signifies why the role of the Black church is so important. That we have to return to who we are, and making sure that we are at tables, and not just asking to be at the tables, but really saying this is why we need to be at the table, because we represent an underrepresented community that brings valuable resources and can really help the medical field. And you lifted it up, and I did too. You're producing medication that sometimes will not work for our population, but it's being prescribed to the people with no impact. And so those are things we have to make sure that, does not continue to happen, that we have enough representation, like you said, in clinical trials, and clinicians that, like you said, are coming up with ideas, so that way we have this healthy balance that our community needs are being met. And so I think as the Black church, we have to stand up to do what we need to do, to speak to all of those who are making these decisions, to say, we're not looking at just one sect of the population, but we need to make sure that this is not just equal, but equitable, that we're getting something out of this too, because it benefits our population, our communities.
You know something? I don't know if the community is aware that the cultural ambassadors meet with principal investigators weekly when they have new grants that they're seeking, and they're seeking ways to get their work processed, and the ambassadors have done a great work in the infancy of some of these new medications that are coming out. And we've helped them in many ways. It's simple things like the way the posters look. Years ago, Reverend Morrison, when you were here in New Haven, you looked at a picture of a little kid had a 1950 haircut. He said, "Man, nobody gonna believe this."
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's little things that or you have no people of color on the posters. All of these things help to get our involvement. It bring our eyes to it. We have a newsletter that we try to do quarterly. That has great articles, great pictures, but it's directed to help our community to get an understanding of what's going on medically in the area of clinical research. It's just another avenue to keep this, bringing awareness to our people.
Yeah, I think that we're living in an age of discovery and great possibility and promise. So, for example, with the FDA kiosk machine that we were partnering in terms of looking at its assessment, the kiosk machine was built like a Apple iPod, and you could bring it into the church. Your members and people of the community could come in, get their blood pressure done. They could come in and find food banks. They could come in and do telemedicine, talk to their doctor. And, it just makes it so much easier. Like if you looked at COVID, when folk couldn't even get to the emergency room, couldn't get in the hospital, couldn't get to their doctor. and they were isolated and had to be in locked down. This would have been a beautiful. This was a beautiful idea that never really we never really got to see it to fruition. But just think if it was in every church, every community center, this would have been awesome. We started taking temperatures in the church, but this is more than just the temperature. This is like, oh no, but this
full
person,
service guy.
full service stop right there in the community. And so this could have saved millions of dollars and helped us. And so that's maybe one of the things in the future we can do ourselves. Sometimes we have to break from the university and just like Booker T. Washington, we've got to throw our bread on the water, and we got to work for ourselves to bring about the benefits that we're looking to achieve in our community. All right, guys, we're almost out of time. So, if you have any other thoughts, I know I wanted to mention that maybe one of our first shows or second shows in the new year would include you mentoring people, meeting with one young person from your church or with our young cultural ambassadors, and you can include some people in that discussion. And let's listen to see what they have to say, because I'm going to tell you, some of the things I've heard are terrifying to me, but maybe that's because I'm an old soldier. And, the new soldiers got like a whole new language that I don't understand, Morrison. In fact, when somebody wrote to me some years ago, LOL, I didn't know what the hell that was. I had to learn the language, So we may have to be retaught ourselves. And with the help of our communities and our young people as well as our seniors. So as we move forward, we move with possibility and hope and prayer, and knowing that the Lord is. We want to be on His side. We don't want Him on our side. And
Right.
Hopefully, we can achieve some greatness. Any other closing comments, thoughts?
I think that's a great.
Y'all talk at the same time. Okay, I see. Rev Morrison, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I was just saying that was a great idea. I think Dr. Blue was saying the same thing, getting our younger voices involved.
Yeah.
I was saying that. I was basically saying that, I think that's necessary. They are creative in their own right. You think about now, you can open up electronic box. They don't need any instructions. They know it, immediately. And so I think part of it is this will give us opportunity, as you said, just to sit down and listen, to hear what they're saying so that they can begin to help us think about different ways in which how we can not only approach our community, but just to address them and, help out and have them to buy in and to see the importance of the work that we're doing and why we need to continue to advocate for our communities and all of that. So I think this is going to be a beautiful thing, and it's going to strengthen who we are, because I think at the core, that's some of what we used to do. It was the value of family and connectivity within our communities. That's what made us strong. Right. And I think what we're doing now is getting back to those core principles that will help to reinvigorate our communities and our young people, and that they can find agency, voice for themselves, and move forward from there. So I think this is going to be great.
Let me ask you and Reverend Morrison one final question. Your return to the South from what the Ivy League area of Yale, New Haven. This is the Queen City, I guess, for the North. Did you find the same kind of disparity and lack of knowledge with regard to clinical trials and resistance and hesitation? And as pastors and as cultural ambassadors, I think it's a difference when you're both and you're just one, because there are some pastors who just lean on the gospel, just tell Jesus. Go into your secret closet, tell Jesus, and He gonna heal you. And then you have cultural ambassadors say, yeah, you got to do both. You got to talk to Jesus, but you got to talk to a doctor. In the South, do you find the same kind of disparities like that you found in Waterbury or in New Haven, in Atlanta, and in Charlotte?
Yeah, I would say yes. And it's surprising for me, particularly because I'm in the Atlanta area. So you have some great historic schools, Morehouse, Spelman. You've got, UGA. You've got, all of these great schools and medical centers. Emory, which is a leading medical center. You've got even the large trauma centers like a Grady. And yet right there in a block away or 10 miles away, you have Black folks, some who are really highly educated and yet will not ever participate in a clinical trial, won't even hear of it because of the history and because of just the traditional, we're not a part of that. You've got the disparities of healthcare as well. Where I shudder to think of how many people in our congregation do not have health care. And I have supposedly a more affluent congregation.
Right.
And yet they don't have access to health care. And not only in Atlanta, but in South Carolina, of course, where my family lived in the upper part of South Carolina. But then you get to Columbia area, it's the same thing. It's just as bad or worse.
Wow.
I would definitely agree with Reverend Morrison. I actually think it's worse. And one of the reasons I believe it's worse, and I think the data will back this up, there are more rural areas down south. And the more rural areas you have, you're going to find greater barriers. So you're dealing with structural and procedural barriers that you have down south. So the limited accessibility, the lack of awareness, the lack of health insurance. And so you have all of these things that are coming up against a lot of these rural areas. And we know this working with some of the other organizations that we're working with, where we know people who are dealing with the issue and they had to drive hours to go receive help because their local community did not have the resources. So I think your location matters. And it shouldn't matter. It should not. Healthcare should not be determined. I would say equitable healthcare should not be determined by zip code.
That's right.
But it is.
But it is.
That needs to be on a poster right there. That sentence, a caption.
I want to thank you all. Our time is up. I appreciate you guys. This show is going to be great. We're going to send it to you so you can distribute it on your social media sites and to your congregation. And we're going to do the same here because we're one, cultural ambassadors looking for better health outcomes for our people. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'm on roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gon' give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP